Hey, all. Welcome to the Anxiety Warriors podcast. We are your hosts, Margot
and Abby. We are friends, teachers, and storytellers, but above all, we're anxiety warriors on a mission to raise awareness and understanding about anxiety and mental health.
You will hear honest, engaging, and joyful stories from us and many other anxiety warriors about living with anxiety. If you're seeking a space to laugh, connect, feel inspired and empowered, and learn valuable tips rooted in mindfulness and more, your warrior community is here for you.
Join us as we navigate this journey of life together.
Welcome, warriors.
Yay!
We were just having a chuckle before Abby snuck in a recording in progress.
You're right, it was. We were chuckling.
You snuck it in.
Yeah.
We got it together.
I was clicking. You're like, you ready? And then we started to side talk as I was clicking.
Got it. Fair enough. You couldn't stop from finishing the press of the click.
Stop the click.
Can't stop that. We're both just dancing our pointer fingers. So this is riveting content.
Yes.
Warriors. Today we're talking about mansplaining. Different from manspreading.
But we could add that too.
Similar.
Because that is similar in a different way and also causes quite a lot of distress, especially when you're riding on New York City subways.
Yeah. Anywhere that's tight quarters or an airplane.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Especially if you're the person in the middle seat spreading your legs into both other sides. Don't do that. Yeah.
So, little disclaimer, okay? We acknowledge that we're both women. So we only can speak from the female's perspective here.
Yes.
Our own personal experiences with mansplaining, right? If you are a man listening to this podcast, great. We love you. This has nothing to do with like our feelings towards men in general, or we're not trying to be out here saying like every man everywhere is guilty of mansplaining or manspreading. That is definitely not the goal of this episode. I can say comfortably, yes.
Yeah. We're not here to dump on guys.
Exactly.
We're here to explain and share our experiences where men have mansplained to us and how that feels.
And how it feels, right? So just know, like all of our episodes, we're just recounting for you experiences that we've had in the most honest and vulnerable way that we can. And and unfortunately, we could probably talk for a very long time about this experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But we will bring it down to a comfortable amount of time.
Correct.
So first of all, I reached out to Abby about this topic a few weeks ago, and it just kept, getting moved. We were canceling sessions, or we were like, let's talk about something else first. And so how it came about, though, was a viral video that was going around a few weeks ago that I happened to just see on Instagram. And it was a female pro golfer. Her name is Georgia Ball. She's from the UK. And I shared this video with Abby, and we both agreed, okay, this is a good topic for us. And so the short version is that she's a female pro golfer. She's a young woman. I don't know exactly her age, but I'm pretty sure I can say confidently that she's under 30. And she has tutorials that she posts a lot on Instagram. And or just videos of her like taking swings or doing different skills or whatever. And so she had her phone or her camera or whatever set up in the way that she always does. And she was just hitting balls at the, whatever you call it, the place where you hit balls. What do you call that place?
Driving range?
The driving range. Thank you. See, as you can tell, I'm not a sporty spice. And so
I'm super sporty.
Super sport. Yes, of course. But I just saying, I couldn't think of the name and I knew I wasn't going to come up with it in any reasonable amount of time. So at the driving range, just hitting balls. And so the video starts where, she hits a ball and then you hear a man's voice nearby. And he just says, hey, you don't want it, that thing you just did. You don't want to do it like that. You want to do this, that, the other thing. It's a whole, 2-minute video, if not longer, of just the most cringeworthy, repetitive, and mansplaining energy that you've ever freaking heard. Like, and the worst part was that he doesn't know this woman from Adam, like, or from Eve, excuse me, doesn't know this woman, doesn't know her position. Okay, fine, fair enough. Anyone could be mansplained, explained about anything at any time. But she very, very considerately kept saying to him, she didn't say, hey, I'm a pro female golfer, you can fuck off, which is what most of me and everyone else reading the comments of this video wanted her to say, but cool, whatever. She probably did the right thing in that moment, kept herself safe, whatever. And so she said, oh, I'm actually just working on a new swing in this moment. She kept repeating it, right? It was sort of like the consistency compounds message, but like he was not receiving that as like an acceptable answer. He just kept trying to explain to her why what he was saying was correct and why what she was doing was incorrect. Meanwhile, she said again, at least 2 or 3 times in a short video, she says, I'm actually just working on a new swing right now, right? Like that is just the most hell yeah, like clap your hands kind of way to respond to someone that is explaining anything to you when they have no idea who you are or what you know or don't know or whatever, when you're a complete stranger. And so she kind of clocks her own camera because she had set the camera up for herself, right? To shoot Instagram videos or whatever. I'm guessing she has a YouTube channel, whatever. And so she clocks the camera like with her eyes. She's kind of just like almost like a WTF with her eyes. Anyway, shortly after, this video goes completely viral, and so it was all over news outlets, certainly in the UK, but all over the world, people just talking about this idea of like how upsetting and cringeworthy this moment was, and rage and the feelings of discomfort that I felt, not just for her, but for him in that situation. And she didn't out him. He was just some random dude. I have no idea if he was a pro or wasn't or whatever. But he made comments, and in the comments, it was like, I've been golfing for over 20 years, blah, blah, blah. Seemingly then he's much older than she is. So again, it's like, oh, you assume then because you're older, you know more, you know better. And so like that could be a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
About, older people telling younger people how they should think and feel and behave and react or not. But for the purpose of this was what sort of like kicked off you and me talking about mansplaining back and forth and deciding that we were going to chat about this.
And didn't at the end of the video, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure at the end of the video when she hit the ball, he took credit for her hit. He was like, see?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he basically he was planning to just like wait there and watch her work. Right. And so like, I mean, we're going to get into this, but just like for me, so much of the intrigue was the reaction from the public, which is, I mean, some of that is problematic generally. It's like we put our lives online and then we're subject to criticism and approval or disapproval from the masses, people that have nothing to do with us, whatever. And that's okay. We all kind of agree to that when you put your life online, I guess, right? Luckily, so many of the comments like passed the sniff check though. Like it was nice to see that even men were just kind of like, this isn't cool, right? Like whatever, maybe you should have just, when she responded, you just move on, right? You made your point, just walk away.
Right.
But then people were like upset with her. There were some subset of people that were just like, why didn't you yell at him? Why didn't you tell him off? Why didn't you tell him who you were? You know what I mean? Or whatever. And it's just like, do we owe that to that person?
Well, why do we have to justify like, oh, I'm an expert? Like, it doesn't matter. Maybe I'm just trying something new and I'm not an expert. Anything. Right. It's like, right. They don't need that information. Just
exactly
fuck off.
Right. And then for me, it becomes an issue of safety.
Yes.
And she's a young woman at a very male dominated place, most likely. And okay, so, and that's, I mean, we've talked about anxiety being a woman before at length. And so that has to play in here too, right? It's just like she took care of herself.
Right.
And ultimately, I feel like what she did was such a power move to some extent because she didn't defend herself, because she didn't explain who she was. She didn't take the bait that he was desperately trying to get her to acknowledge him and treat him like some kind of fucking god for being a man who's been golfing for 20 plus years or whatever, for teaching her something. And she didn't give him any of that, zero satisfaction.
Right.
And that was what kept me from going into complete rage spiral, because I was like, oh, I'm actually going to learn from this woman in this moment. It's sad that it has to be like this, but what can we all glean from that, right? What can we all take away from that moment? So anyway, that was just sort of the inspo behind having the chat. So let's start with like, how do you define mansplain?
Yeah.
How do we define it?
Yeah.
And then we'll like share a story.
Okay. I feel like I define it a few different ways, but ultimately in my experience, like when you and I talked about like having this conversation, I started to like think about, you know, all the times that this has happened to me. And most of the time it is by men, right? Like there were not that many females, a couple females jumped out, but not that many where, you know, so it felt primarily from men that over my life have explained things to me like I'm a child or dumb about a subject that I know a lot about, right? But or about a subject that I don't care about. I would even say that I've been mansplained about stuff that I don't care about. Like, why don't you ask me if I'm interested in hearing your dumb lecture first, right? You're not my college professor, you know, I'm not paying to learn from you, right? So what I feel like for me in regards to like my experiences with mansplaining, most of the time it's men explaining something to me that I already know, I already understand, I already get, and they're over explaining it without asking me what my baseline of the knowledge is, or really even acknowledging me as like like the other person in a conversation.
Right. Yes. That's exact. That last part especially is what sticks out for me and how I would define it for myself, because it feels like you're being talked at.
Yes.
Right? You're just, somebody needs to hear their own voice, share information, doesn't care who's listening or not. And then, but the argument then is that like, are they doing it to men as well? And not in my experience, right? If you're at a party or at a dinner situation or whatever, and I've just finished having an interaction where a male person is talking at me for X amount of time about X, and then maybe the person next to them even asks a question like, "Oh, tell me more about that. I actually didn't." And then the tone changes completely, and it's kind of just like you said, you're not being treated like a child or like, you know, someone that's beneath that person sharing that information. It's like all of a sudden there's like the kinship, I guess, of being the same gender. I have no idea. Or like the automatic respect that even if the other person's a man and they're saying like, "Hey, actually didn't know that. Can you tell me more about that?"
It's not condescending.
Right, exactly. Well, then it's like, oh, okay. But the opportunity to quote unquote educate the man clearly isn't there, right? Because the energy changes completely to just like, oh, it's just X, Y, or Z. It feels very matter of fact. Whatever the answer to the question is more matter of fact. It's more direct. It's less wordy. It's less pedantic and descending, right?
Yes.
Period. So I think that's the added piece too. It's like, it's not just the fact that you're being talked at, it's that it's coddling in some way. And did you not get it? Did you need me to explain it differently? You know, slower, like what? And that's the energy. It's not even always about the words for me. Sometimes it's just the vibe that a man person has, that I'm just like, you didn't even need to say all that. I can just tell that you feel some certain kind of way about me. Right? Or about what I know or don't know or who I am. Because it's not just about, the other thing I want to say too is that it's not just about what they think you know or don't know. It's about who they think you are. Right? Because I think too, when like you look at this young, attractive golf pro, if we go back to that example, it's the assumption is you're not a pro golfer.
Right.
So are you just saying like, oh, I don't know what you know. I'm saying that by looking at you, I've decided who you must be or who you're likely to be.
Yes.
So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's like when it happens to me, like what I'm screaming in my head is like, do you think I'm dumb? Right? Like just the way that they say it or what they're saying. And like, I have one story that like the moment we said we are going to do this, I was like, bingo. Right. But like the whole time, like I like in my body, I'm ready to like, my body is like screaming. Right. But then you have to like, especially depending on the situation, you need either to keep yourself safe or you have to be polite. Because it might be like a family member of your husband's or yours, or, like sometimes
you're going to see often.
Yes, you can't actually react the way you want to for whatever reason. But inside, my body is screaming and like I'm just ultimately enraged. And then I have to like channel it all into like a calm response.
Right. Or maybe they're an authority figure too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's awful. Awful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So mine, I mean, again, we could literally write a novella.
Right.
But I'm going way back for this story.
Okay.
Because this was a pivotal moment for me. It was my senior year of high school. And there was I had been dancing since I was 3 years old. Not competitively. I didn't dance with any kind of competition spirit until college. And but this was the first time as I entered my senior year that I was going to have a male teacher. I'd always had female teachers up until that point. So from the age of 3 to the age of 17, I had only had women as my teachers. And so I had a lot of senioritis, as most seniors do. And dance was no exception. Like obviously I had senioritis in school or whatever, like excited to be going into my last year of high school and generally good high school experience. I was excited to finish out my experience with my classmates and my friends and whatever. And being at dance was the same thing. And like I had spent almost 12 years of my life dancing at the same school with so many of the teachers that had taught me when I was little, kept teaching me when I was older. And so I can acknowledge, right, that like I was going through a little bit of a spicy moment for myself. I was feeling kind of free and liberated, and I was like finding my voice, And I was a quiet, well-behaved, good student, both in school and in dance, right? Like, and when I say good, I don't mean like I was smart, I did really well. Like I did moderately fine in most classes. Some classes better than others, like plenty of people. But, and I was no like seriously technically proficient dancer, but I knew I could dance. I knew I loved to dance, right? That was really the biggest thing. And I felt a certain level of like comfortability in my body and in my ability and especially my ability to emote. So like, even if I wasn't like the best, like technical, like do this, point toes like that, I knew that like, regardless, I could feel the moment and embody what I was meant to embody, right? The movement, the music, whatever it was. Anyway, my biggest thing was that I wanted to have fun. I just wanted to have fun. I was saying senior year, I want to have so much fun. So, let's just say I didn't get on with this male dance teacher right from the beginning. I'm not really sure exactly what it was. And as a sort of ego-minded teenage girl at the time, I was just kind of like, I didn't give a shit either. I was kind of like, I don't get the vibe this guy likes me, but like, whatever, I don't care, and I had sort of like felt like I did my time at my dance school and like, I just wanted to be there and be in the moment, be in my body, do the things that I would normally do in any other given year and move on, graduate and move on, And this guy was a serious teacher. And again, it wasn't that my other teachers weren't serious, but like he'd just been hired. He was extremely like, he had of course had all these notes of, oh, this and that. And I learned to teach here and I danced on this stage and I did Swan Lake and all of this stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. That's awesome. But you are not at a competitive dance school. I don't know if you don't know that, but like you're not. And so the vibe here is not what you're necessarily bringing. Right. And look, we all have good teachers that work for us. And I'm sure there were other people in my class that were like, I love this guy. He's perfect for me, whatever. We just didn't get on right away. And so he would regularly just get annoyed with me with like my perceived lack of focus, right? The fact that I was chatty with my friends at the beginning and the end of class, sometimes in the middle too. The fact that I was super giggly a lot that year. And part of it, looking back, was like just my discomfort with having a male teacher.
Of course.
I'd never had a male teacher in dance before, nor was it kind of explained to us, right? And here I am in my late teens or mid-teens, whatever. And I didn't think about that at that time, but like thinking about it in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, I had I think some like light anxiety about the fact that this was a man in my space that never had to dance in front of like that before and be judged by and whatever. And for once, I wasn't going to be teacher's pet. Like I was good at like being a good kid in class and school, and dance was no exception. I was just a good kid, you know, but in my senioritis, whatever. Anyway, this is a lot of backstory, but one day he pulls me aside and he says, you know, Margot, are you here to learn or are you here to have fun? And I said, I'm here to have fun. Like I didn't even blink.
Yeah.
And I think it surprised him because A, it wasn't the answer he wanted, I don't think. And B, it clearly enraged him. He didn't yell because that wasn't his way, but he was angry. There was a tone shift. His face became red. I felt I could, you know, we were in each other's faces to some extent because he didn't like, you know, it wasn't like active humiliation. It wasn't like that, but people could see us standing close together. And he was sort of like in my face a little bit about like, why are you here? Right. And I'm like, I'm here. You gave me two choices. I told you which one I'm here for.
Yeah.
And he basically like threatened me a little bit, like veiled, but he's just like, if you're not serious, like maybe you should sit this one out. Maybe you should not come. Like, and so aside from the fact that like, okay, my parents were paying for dance class. And again, we weren't some competitive dance school where it's like everyone here is serious and everyone here logs 6 hours a day of dance. There are studios that are like that. And you have to like try out to get into certain classes. This was not that environment. And I could feel myself too becoming lightly amused by him. Simultaneously, when he threatened me though to like be kicked out or to leave, that's when things really shifted. I was just like, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And so I remember going home. I was really upset. I was crying. I was angry. I was telling my mom was livid. She was so livid. So she called the dance studio and was like, what the fuck? You're not telling, this guy's here out of nowhere. I don't know what his deal is, but fix it. Right. My daughter's talking about quitting dance in her last year of dance. Like this is bullshit. And, you know, the owner who, again, had taught me, I was her first class before she even owned a studio. She was teaching out of her basement with like a small group of us. And I was literally in her first group of kids ever. So she was obviously, okay, like I'm going to handle this. It's going to be fine. So next class, I'm like, I didn't even look at this man, did not look at him. But he comes up to me afterwards and without saying like, you got me in trouble, basically.
He starts in trouble.
For real. He starts to explain to me why my behavior was not okay. And look, I can acknowledge I was maybe a bratty teenage girl, right? Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I don't know. I'm trying really hard to think like, I feel like I was just being a normal teenage girl. Who could feel that this guy didn't like me and try to just, you know, stay away and continue to be myself and have fun. And you know what it's like when we're around kids and they can tell you don't like them, you don't like, you know. And so it was one of those situations. And so I stayed quiet and he basically was continuing to like explain to me why he said what he said, why he did what he did. And I just stood there. I didn't look at him. I just went, sure, whatever. And he was basically like trying to be apologetic without apologizing. Because it was like, you know, the person who ran the studio was probably like, hey, you need to deal with this. Right. And he didn't want to say what he should have said, which maybe would have changed nothing. But I think it would have if he apologized to me. I
took
do
responsibility
think
and ownership. Yeah.
I think it would have changed everything. But maybe we would have been able to start fresh after that. But clearly he wasn't looking to repair. Right. It was just kind of like, here's what you did wrong. That's why you deserve the interaction we had last class. And so he says to me, I think I probably responded with like one thing. I was just like, listen, we don't have to like each other. I don't, you know, whatever. I'm just here to have fun with my friends and dance. That's what I've always done here. And he was kind of like, okay, well, he's like, if you don't want to be serious, he's like, fine, I can't make you be serious, but people aren't going to want to watch you. Right. Was basically then the new argument was not about my behavior, but more about like, no one's going to enjoy your performance if you don't take it seriously. Fine. Okay. So then like time goes on and I'll never forget after all of that, he thought he was like giving me a gotcha moment because he separated our class into small groups. And we had just learned the routine. And he goes, I'm going to have the class next door come in. I'm not going to say anything to them. and I'm going to ask them at the end to share where their eyes went and talk about why, right? And so the other class came in, and there were other seniors. I think that we were in lyrical, they were in tap. And so they came in, and we split up into groups and performed this routine. And he goes, and you could tell he was kind of just like, I've got her. It felt like I've got her situation. Like, and I don't remember exactly. I feel like I should remember, but I don't. I feel like he kind of said something. He's like, see, because the first group went, and the girl who they said that they noticed the most was this one person, and they said why, and she was doing this, and I thought that, and meanwhile, I don't love this process for us, but he did it anyway. So fine, fair enough. None of us were in a position to stop him. So he starts calling out the girl that they said was doing the best, right? He was like, she was focused, and he starts saying all these things that he had said that I wasn't, basically. And he kind of gave me like a smirk, or I caught like a smirk. And so my group goes, right? Again, without a word of whatever, the music plays and we all perform. And so like maybe 2.5 minutes later, time for feedback. Every single one of them said that their eyes were on me the whole time. Every single one of them. And so like it literally was the best clapback because I didn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
Right. I did give him a quick face. And a couple of my friends in class that knew about the situation were kind of like, gave me one of these, which I was just doing like a wide-eyed side eye. And it was just the best like validation, like, oh, you don't think I'm focused? Right? You don't think I can do this just because I'm not some goody two shoes in your class, like literally following everything you say, like I'm obsessed with you? Because that is kind of how a lot of the other dancers in my class treated him, like he was some kind of god, And so because I didn't treat him like a god, he was clearly threatened by me. And so on and on the threats go. But ultimately, I felt very vindicated because I got all the eyes on me just being myself and having fun. Right. Ultimately, that's all I wanted to do was dance and have fun. And so if the goal was to have everyone stare at me, I guess I accomplished that, but that was never the goal. I'm never up there because I'm like, everyone look at me. I'm up there because I love to dance and I like to perform. Right. So like, period, the end, like exclamation point. But yeah, I'll never, ever forget this situation because the level of like, just the level of rage that I could feel from this person in his perceived lack of just respect that I was offering him, apparently. But I just will never forget this. Like he just thought he knew all, that he knew the way to be and how to be it. And that might be true, maybe like more broadly, or for disciplined dancers. That's not who I was. And I made it plain. And that's not where he was working. And we all made it plain.
Right.
So like,
go work at Alvin Alley or whatever those places are called. Like,
go work at literally any other dozens of competitive dance studios across Long Island. Like, give me a break. You're not special, whatever. Or if you were that special, you'd have a job choreographing somewhere else.
Yeah.
So anyway, no offense to my dance school. It wasn't like that, but like ultimately I felt so vindicated. Kind of like this viral real woman who was just kind of like, she has the whole world on her side here. And so it felt like that to me on the inside. I felt like, okay, it might as well be the whole world, because as long as I'm feeling vindicated in this moment. And it wasn't like I was going to be like, I'm going to do my best to make sure everyone stares at me. Nope. I was just myself and I had fun. Period.
I hate your story. No offense. I am like so enraged. I am so.
This many years later, I can laugh about it, but it was a traumatic time, actually.
Yes.
I almost quit several times that year because of him.
Right.
He was a bully.
And how many?
And not just to me, but
No, how many people stopped loving dance because of him? How many people did he ruin their love of dance? Like, luckily, it didn't happen to you. Other things happen, but you don't know how many people quit because of him.
100%.
Like, did he hurt
know.
this woman's business at all? Like,
he didn't. Well, he was only there for like maybe one more year, and then he was gone, from what I remember hearing. But for who knows what reason, but still,
he needed to power trip himself on children, on children, like,
or maybe don't presume. Try to get to know not just me, but all of us, right?
Right.
It was very
Build a
much
relationship. You're a male staring at children's bodies while they move around. Have an idea of yourself in this space. Like, I mean, there's so many things I could yell about right now. Like, I'm very overcome with disgust and anger at the same time.
Yeah, I get
I mean,
that.
Validating for you at the end.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I mean, and
but imagine if that wasn't the case, right?
Right.
Because he was verbally singling me out without using my name.
Trying to shame you. Like,
Yep. So yeah. And if it wasn't that result, I don't know. I would be looking back at it very differently, I'm sure.
Right.
But, you know.
Do you have, because when you were telling this story and you were telling his interactions and you were sharing some of the things he said and he did, it made me think of my 8th grade health teacher. It made me think of my 9th or 10th grade gym teacher. I had one male gym teacher who was great, but the other gym teacher was a little bit of a perv and a power trip. The health teacher was a definite perv and power trip, right? And my chemistry teacher, again, same thing. So like, I'm just wondering, like, when you tell that story, does it make you think of any other male teachers that did those things or no?
Almost all of them.
Oh, almost all of them. Yeah. Yeah.
In high school. Yeah. Middle school, not so much. But yeah, at least like going from each grade, right? There wasn't male teachers in every, in certain subjects for each grade. But if I had to think back on like my catalog of male teachers, at least half of them were like sexist.
Yes.
Or pervs or some
power
version.
Tripper or talk down to the girls.
100%. Yeah. And they were similar in terms of like, it was math, health, and PE also. And yeah, maybe there's, no, those are the big 3 subjects that were typically.
I think I lucked out in math. I had mostly female teachers for math.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had mostly female teachers too, but I did have at least 2 male math teachers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And one of them was great. One of them was great. The other one was a dick.
Yeah.
Putting it plainly.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember like mansplaining, but I do remember just the general like unworthiness feeling around him in particular. Yeah, 100%. And I'm guessing you did as well. I mean, you just said a few of them, but
yeah. Or if I
college it was a little
anything, better. Like I would get mansplained, even though they were in the wrong. The teacher was in the wrong, and I would be mansplained how I was wrong for asking the question, not about how when they tell us to do one thing and then they do the other thing, why that's okay, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, I know. It's so frustrating.
It's infuriating.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Get ready. All right.
Okay.
I feel like I'm not like upset about mine, right? But like I'm still carrying,
I might be.
I'm carrying the upset from yours. So I'm trying to like take a breath before I like tell the story so it doesn't, because like I don't really care anymore, right? It's at this point for me, it's amusing, right?
Yeah.
So this is one of Dan's family members. And you've heard me talk about this person. I've alluded to this person on our podcast. This person is a male know-it-all. He's horrible. And one time for Dan's birthday, this was during the pandemic, we were all sitting on our porch outside celebrating Dan's birthday. And the pandemic kind of put kids yoga and mindfulness like in person on hold, right? Teaching in schools, doing the trainings. You know, at this point, I had been teaching children yoga and mindfulness as a part-time to full-time job. You know, this was 2020. We were doing the birthday and everything. I had been doing it in person with children since 2012, 2012. Teaching adults how to teach children yoga and mindfulness and social emotional learning, right? Hundreds and hundreds of hours, not to mention just teaching in general yoga since 2006 or 7, right?
Yeah.
I have done 2 Vipassana retreats, which are mindfulness retreats in total silence. I feel like although I will never fully be an expert in mindfulness or yoga because there's always so many different avenues and things to learn and things are always being updated and changed, I feel pretty confident when talking about yoga and mindfulness teaching children yoga and mindfulness and why it is important and valuable. And this guy at this dinner, where I want to be polite, it's my, at the time, boyfriend's dinner, right? It's during the pandemic. We're outside. We want to be safe. We don't see this part of his family that often because of the pandemic, right? So trying to keep everything like copacetic. Sits next to me, and we've talked about close talkers. He's the close talker, right? So gross. You know how I feel about the pandemic. And now he's a close talker to me on the porch. Luckily, we're outside. And he starts just telling me how important mindfulness is, right? I'm like, I mean, inside, in my mind, I'm like, no fucking shit. Like, I learned mindfulness from a therapist to help me with my anxiety. I know how valuable mindfulness is. I know how important it is. Then he's telling me about all the struggles of children, both in and outside of school. He hasn't taught in a school. Like, how does he know? He doesn't know children. He doesn't know children. You know, he knows nothing. Like in regards to teaching children, how to teach children, you know, he would be your dance teacher, right? Like that's the type of teacher he would be, right?
Okay.
Where he just like powers over people and just says a lot of stuff at them, right? So he's telling me how important it is for school kids, how much they need social emotional learning. He's telling me all about mindfulness incorrectly, not really understanding what mindfulness is.
Yeah.
And how valuable these things are and how I really need to work really hard to get this to kids, and telling me all these different ways that I should be during the pandemic trying to reach out to teach kids yoga and mindfulness. And I'm like, I offer online courses. I'm making audio courses. I'm like trying to slip in the ways that I'm actually trying to make it accessible during a pandemic, right? He doesn't care. He just keeps telling me all the reasons that children need these practices, why schools need these practices, why these practices are valuable, and constantly explaining to me without any questions about my history, knowing that he knows that I've done this. He knows that I've been teaching, right?
Yeah.
What I do know, doesn't ask me where I'm struggling. Maybe if he had asked where I was struggling, he could offer some insight, right? And it was just this like 30-minute one-sided conversation explaining to me everything that if I felt like I was an expert in anything, it would be that.
Right. So 30 minutes is a long time.
At a birthday party.
Really a long time.
Like,
do you think there's a chance that he was talking at you because he knew he couldn't talk at anyone else because you were like new-ish to the situation in terms of Dan's family? Or he was trying to make an impression on you, like, hey, look at me, I'm smart. And because he's probably maybe feels very insecure about his dumbness, that he was just like, here's someone I can manipulate.
Yeah, he definitely has a personality disorder, for sure. And part of that is that, and I'm not just blatantly saying that. I'm not just throwing that out there. It is very classic. And he very much wants people to think that he is smart and he knows a lot of things, and, you know, and some things he does know. If I wanted to ask about, you know, I won't say it. I won't say it. It's a very niche thing. But if I was curious about certain things, I could ask him, and then he could be as smart as he wants about those things.
Right.
But no, I think honestly, he in some way wanted to talk about the thing that he knows I know about, and then maybe wanted to feel smarter than me or offer something. Like he always, like one time we were all playing like bananagrams, and it was like my first time ever playing, and I kept winning, and that bothered him. You know? So I just feel like he needed to be smarter than me about my subject.
But did you correct anything that he said?
No.
Or did anything he said need correcting?
No, I just remember sitting there like fire on the inside, trying to cool that fire down and saying like, yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, they do need these tools.
Do you think part of the reason why you didn't want to engage further or like challenge anything he said or like add on to what he said, you know, like whether it had been with like research or whatever, was because then you knew it would prolong the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I want it out.
I feel you. Have you been in a situation where that's where you do take the person on? I'm curious.
I feel like I do, but like nothing's coming to mind. Like I feel like I've definitely challenged people but it needs to feel like it's both sides conversation. If this person is just talking at me, I'm not going to engage because they don't care what I have to say. It's not like a reciprocal dialogue.
Yeah.
You know? So when I'm being mansplained, I usually just shut off in my head and wait for it to end. You know, if it feels like there's a possibility for dialogue, then I'll say stuff. But if it just feels like they want to show how smart they are, right? Or like how knowledgeable they are, I just shut it off, right?
Yeah.
You know, have you heard that story about,
interesting.
I can't think of who this is. I can't think of it. I know if I Googled it, you know, because this wasn't an article, like a New York Times article about mansplaining, like in the last 10 years. But there was some person, I want to say scientist, or like astrophysicist, or I don't know what, but it was like someone who wrote a book, and she finds herself at a dinner party and she's talking about some of the subject matter in the book. And a man comes over and tells her, well, you know, maybe if you read this book, you would understand this was not the author's intent. And he starts explaining the author's intent. And then she's like, hi, and then she says her name with the last name of the author. I wrote the book, right? And then he shut up, right? But like, I feel like that's the only time where like, if I wrote something, right? If they were like quoting me, didn't know it was me, then I'd be like, hi.
Yeah.
When it's a one-sided conversation. Right. Then it's the stopper. Let them feel dumb and I'll walk away. Right. Yeah. I'm not going to engage with you. You obviously don't want to have an engaging conversation. You want it one-sided so you can feel smart.
Yeah, well, it's like when, and this has nothing to do with mansplaining, but it just goes back to just like the gender situation here. Whereas like if a woman writes about a social science issue, right, then it's labeled a self-help book. But if a man writes it, he's just a scientist.
Yeah.
Right? He's a doctor of whatever. It's like, okay, actually that woman's a doctor as well. Like it feels like not that there's anything wrong with self-help, right? But it does wind up feeling like some kind of a downgrade compared to the other title, right? And we all just kind of have agreed collectively as a society, unfortunately, that we're okay with this and not enough. I mean, I'm glad that there's more and more conversation about it and that more of us are speaking up about our experiences with toxic men, you know, explaining themselves when they haven't been asked any questions at us for reasons that they have or don't have, it seems. And so, yeah, it's super frustrating. And like, I remember obviously talking to you about this individual many times.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're dealing, at least I'll speak for me, when I'm dealing with someone that I have to see on somewhat of a regular basis, even if that regular basis is only once or twice a year or something, the reaction, right? The reactivity, I understand the impulse to not react in like, I don't know, really bad ways or like super negative ways, because then it's like you're stirring a pot that you don't necessarily want to stir.
Even neutral ways with this person.
Right. You know? Right. The fact that you were winning at a game and it pissed him off. It's like you literally were doing the most benign thing, which was playing the game that everyone was playing. And I'd
never played it before. It was just like beginner's luck or whatever. Or like ADHD luck, like, because I'm good with letters.
Sounds like a big old baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big old baby.
But even like watching mansplaining, like you talked about the video, right? But like, as we were talking about this, it also reminded me of like the time that I was like at the Omega Institute, and it was the yoga service conference. And they had like a lot of big names, and they had this big presentation, and there was a white male in this like, what's it called when you have like a bunch of people and you can ask them questions?
Panel?
Like a panel. Yeah. And there was this white male who's written a book that in the yoga world, you probably know this book. It's about trauma and the body.
Yes.
And then there was a woman of color also on stage. And then there was like a few other people. And during this conversation, he kept interrupting the woman, right? He kept talking over her. He kept mansplaining the things that even the audience knew. Oof. And it was really uncomfortable. And afterwards, this is when we were doing like a yoga training. The teachers, instead of doing the next segment in the training, actually talked talked out what we all just saw.
Wow. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Because it was like so in your face, like the male, female, but also white male, woman of color dynamic, and how he just kept interrupting her. He kept mansplaining to her about a subject that she obviously was well equipped in, right? And it was so uncomfortable, and no one really spoke up. Like the moderator tried to, but no one called out the man. No one said, hey, she knows the subject.
I was about to say, nothing happened in the moment, though.
No, right. Did anyone say anything after? I don't know, but it was like a really uncomfortable thing, and still no one spoke up, right? So it's like, it's just like, this is the culture as we see it, we feel it, and then it's like, who's going to say what?
And now what? Right, exactly. What happens next? Yeah. And it's complicated, and it's a challenge, and it's what sucks about it, I think, ultimately, is that us as women, and I can't even imagine, or I can't imagine, that's what's sad and heartbreaking and so infuriating, that what women of color go through is that we're always the ones that are responsible for trying to fix it all. Like, we don't have cohorts in the men here, right? In the same way that we should. It goes back to our conversation about the overturning of Roe, about the rollback of women's reproductive freedom. It's like, we actually need men to be at the forefront of these discussions, telling their fellow man to shut the fuck up and back off, right? Like, that is just like we need white women standing up for Black women. Like, that is unfortunately where most of the change needs to happen. I'm sorry, white women yelling at other white women, right? Like, and I mean, again, this could devolve into a bunch of different conversations, some of which we've had, but yeah, it's really hard to change the culture. I think that's part of where we're going to end up here. It's just like, we can acknowledge that this is happening and that it's challenging to try to be part of a new group of a new generation, or teach the younger generation how they should be. And it's just all we're doing, I think, is hoping that somebody else will get it right, when really we need to be the ones to be brave enough to stand up and speak up for ourselves, or say something to that person on that panel, or call it out while it's happening. And not just because you're looking to shame them, though sometimes it can be a useful tool to some extent, right? But like, afterwards, somebody needed to approach that person and be like, here's what you did that was super problematic, and why you won't be invited back, right? It's like, then it's not shaming like publicly, but you're saying like, hey, that was unacceptable, and I wasn't going to tell you, I wasn't going to get up there and take the mic from you, but that this was a one and done, and this is the reason why, right? And if somebody calls me and asks me for a recommendation for you, I'm gonna tell them no, right? Like, and so that's the kind of stuff that we need, I think, more broadly as a culture, to try to hear each other a little bit better, try to not silence women, no matter what the situation is. I mean, again, we could get really dark with it if we wanted to, but if it's as simple as like telling a 17-year-old dancer that what she's doing is failing her in her chosen activity, or a guy explaining to you what your literal business is, what you've dedicated years and tons of money and time and dedicated energy towards learning and becoming and embodying, then like, what hope do we freaking have here? But the hope is that we have hope still, right? I have hope still. I really do. And I found enough men that are willing to listen and be corrected and be called out in order to, you know what I'm saying? So like, we can acknowledge that there's shifts happening. There are changes that are being made. We wish it moved faster. We wish everything good would move faster. But we can still kind of have hope about it.
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere inside of us.
Yeah.
Some hope somewhere deep inside. Super interesting. Last thing I want to say before we start to wrap up is when you were talking about the panel, it made me think of, I listen to Glennon Doyle's podcast every week, We Can Do Hard Things. And like last year, they had an episode that was called The Episode That Wasn't. And it like was one of their most viral episodes because of this, exactly what we're talking about. I can't believe I didn't think about it till now. They were supposed to have an interview with a woman, no idea who she was, and they haven't said and they won't. Somebody, maybe, literally, they talked to literally everybody. So like could have been anybody. And her husband was nearby and they were having a tech issue. And so people on the We Can Do Hard Things podcast team were trying to troubleshoot the audio issues that they were having with this woman that was going to be interviewed. And the woman's husband came into frame and proceeded to mansplain at them about what they were doing wrong and how to fix it. And that's not right. And this and that. Anyway, they wound up feeling like shit, right? Like they didn't know their jobs in the way that they did know their jobs. They felt gaslit as they kept trying to say to this guy, actually, we did that already. We tried that. And he kept gaslighting them. And so, they wound up having to get off the call for a certain number of minutes or whatever to try again, or like whatever they were doing in the background. And so the two women that work for the podcast called Glenn and Amanda and Abby and said, hey, this happened and it didn't feel good and whatever. And they just nipped it in the bud. Amanda got on and was like, we're not having this interview. And this is why, right? She like took the reins in that moment, and their immediate defense was like, no, it wasn't like that. And blah, blah, blah. And the wife too. And this is the thing, is that a lot of women are complicit because they defend their men, right? Just even to a fault.
Maybe for safety reasons.
True enough. I don't know. Again, we don't know who this was, the situation, so no effing idea, right?
Right.
Ultimately, the three of them, the hosts of the show, wound up podcasting about this incident. So the entire episode was about this incident. And it was just, the amount of feedback that they got was like out of control. Just so many women talking about similar situations and how often we stay silent in order to keep ourselves safe, right? Not just safe physically, but emotionally, mentally. Like we're bearing the weight of so much all the time, like most humans. We don't need this one more fucking thing on our shoulders to be worried about. So it was fascinating. But anyway, we can still have hope. We can still have some hope. And men, if you're out there listening, or if you're a woman, share this episode with your man, maybe if you think you feel like he needs to hear it or will appreciate it. Hopefully he's in the second camp or will appreciate it, because hopefully he's one of the good ones who doesn't do this kind of thing. So take some time to think. I'm sure you ladies will not have to think too hard about probably a number of stories where you've experienced being mansplained at. Or some kind of other sexist act towards you in your past or present. And spend some time considering it, maybe journaling on it, reflecting on it, having conversations with your fellow warriors about it. If you want to talk to us about it, feel free to shoot us an email or DM us on Instagram. We'd love to, connect in this way. So we're
have
here.
Have a mutual conversation.
Yes. A back and forth. All right. Well, let's end on a light note.
Okay.
Abby, do you have a win of the week? Win of the week.
Okay. Yes, I have a lot of wins. So can I just list a bunch, since we only record twice a month and like we usually alternate. So, okay. So I'm going to just, first of all, I recently taught a kid's birthday party, kids yoga and mindfulness.
Oh my God, we didn't talk about this.
We didn't. And I'm not going to get into too much of it now, but it went really, really well. The kid like hugged me and was like, this is the best birthday ever. Aww. Right. She turned 9. I had a great chat with her parents. I told them I'm terrible at networking. They're going to try to help get me into some new places.
Nice.
And they were just like telling me how much their kid like loves me and the class and all the things they've learned.
This was one of your students, right?
Yeah, one of my students
from one of the schools. Yeah,
wanted me to come over and teach a kids class for her birthday.
Nice.
Which just feels like such an honor. So, and like her 9th birthday, right? Like,
just
like, so that was super fun. That felt like a huge win. I've discovered improvised Shakespeare. You've heard me talk about it once, but the win is, so Dan and I went a total of 6 times before they left Denver. And on our fourth time, we ended up going with Sarah. And as we were leaving, one of the improvised Shakespeare guys came out, and he and I had been like DMing only because I was sharing the improvised Shakespeare stuff in story, and he would be like, thanks. And I was like, thank you. I miss New York City improv. And he was like, oh, I totally get that. Right. We just had like a harmless back and forth, but we were outside taking a picture of the improvised Shakespeare like poster, and he came out and he recognized who I was. And then I like totally tried to not fangirl, but I was like so excited.
You definitely
failed. I think I failed. I tried to play it cool, right? We shook hands, right?
Wow, you shook hands.
We shook hands.
Like, whoa. Yeah. That's massive.
Yeah, and he recognized me from the DMs. And love it.
Love it.
It was so fun. So that was a win. And then I have been mentoring at the zoo, and I've hung out with all three of my mentees, and they're all really super cool and fun. And so I'm looking forward to like building relationships with all of them and everything. So that feels like a win.
Nice.
And we saw MJ, and that was super fun. MJ is a Broadway show about Michael Jackson.
Oh, okay. Yes. Got it. Okay.
So it's all Michael Jackson music.
Yeah. All right.
And
I'm very anti those musicals. Yeah, those are the ones I never want to go to.
Plot, but if you like Michael Jackson music, I know.
No, I love Michael Jackson music, but
no. You're in New York. I'm in Denver.
You don't have as many choices. I get it. it. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. A night out on the town. It's fun.
All
so
wins.
Many wins.
So many wins.
I love.
I'm sure there's more, but they all. That was what
I know. We don't do our solo episodes as often, so you got to catch up on some wins. I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, Warriors, we love you. Thanks for tuning in. If you would like to connect with us for any reason, join our Instagram family. We're at Anxiety Warriors Podcast, or you can shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your big or small wins of the week. Shout out any topic ideas that you have for us. What do you want to hear us chat about or rant about on this show? Or if you think you would be a wonderful guest on our podcast, reach out. Let's get you on the calendar, help you tell your anxiety story. Please take a moment and smash the 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're tuning in right now. You can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is all of our episodes are uploaded for you over there. And if you're feeling super generous, which we hope that you are, you can grab yourself something fun from our Threadless merch shop, which is linked in our show notes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We are so grateful we get to do it with you.
Till next time, don't mansplain.
Don't do it.